Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Between Two Worlds. I am your host, Annika, and we have made it to episode 13. And I feel like that is not really a huge accomplishment on the number or quantity wise, but you know what? I'm going to take it, especially because I love that number. Well, on today's episode, we are going to talk about some deep shit again. I want to talk about the religious wounds created around divination, the end of the world, and so on. I know that sounds kind of insane, and maybe we can't make any connections there, but I promise you, if you stick with me, there are some connections. The fear that, so many of us feel right now isn't new. It lives deep in the bones of our ancestors who stood on the edge of plagues, war, famine, collapse. And you know what? They still lit candles, still cast bones, still pulled cards, and still looked to the stars for answers. As witches, seekers, and sensitives, we don't run from the unknown. We lean into it and speak to it, asking it what it's trying to tell us. So today is more about the stories we have been told about the end, how they've kept us from our inner knowing. I want to talk about the apocalypse, the oracles, and the shadow this has left in us all. Most of all, I want to remind everyone that divination is not a sin. You can't talk about divination without talking about control. And you can't talk about control without talking about the Christian obsession with the end of the fucking world. There's a particular sickness that has haunted the Western psyche for over 2,000 years, a sickness disguised as salvation. It speaks in thunder, trumpets, beasts, and lakes of fire, and it begins in the pages of Revelation. The final book of the Christian Bible isn't just a prophecy, it's a psychological weapon, in my humble opinion. Believed to be written by a mystic, John of Patmos, exiled and persecuted under the Roman Empire. Revelation really wasn't meant to be literal. It was dream logic, an apocalyptic vision and a code of resistance against the empire, full of symbols, metaphors, and archetypes. The language that we witches speak fluently, which is probably why so many of us call bullshit, because we see the deeper truth. Any witch with even a flicker of second sight would recognize it for what it is. It's symbolic language. It's dreamscapes and archetypes, a spellbook disguised as scripture. But this vision was absorbed by the empire, and first by the Church of Rome, and then filtered through centuries of theological manipulation. It became something far more sinister. Really, it became a tool to terrify, a blueprint for obedience. In its wake, it planted a dangerous seed that the world is dying, that it must die, and that only the chosen, the obedient, and the pure will be saved. Obviously, today, the things that humanity has done to the earth, this has caused it to be true. But that really is besides the point. That's an entire different huge loophole. Well, not loophole, rabbit hole. The point I'm trying to talk about is going to be a little bit different here. Okay, so let's get preachy. Ew, I kind of feel like I'm going to be taking up the stand and yelling these scriptures out to y'all, but you know what? It is what it is. So, there's one scripture in Revelation that says, "Then I saw a great white throne, and the one seated on it, and anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire." Imagine being told this, hearing this as a child. You grow up in a culture that tells you that the sky can crack open at any moment, and that your dreams may be demonic, that your intuition is a lie from the serpent, and that everything around you is doomed or sinful. This is not just religious trauma, this is spiritual trauma. It's the kind that buries itself deep inside the body, and it severs your connection to the earth, the stars, and the voice within. I feel like this created a deep wound in our collective psyche, the fear of mystery itself. Because if the future is only judgment, then to seek it is heresy. This is how divination became a threat, not because it was, quote, false, but because it bypassed the priesthood, it bypassed the pulpit, and it whispered to the seeker, "You can know for yourself." But the church just couldn't allow that. So it turned prophecy into property, and it cast oracles out of the temple and rewrote wisdom as sin. So here's another two scriptures. In Leviticus, do not practice divination or seek omens. The other one is Deuteronomy. Anyone who practices sorcery, divination, or interprets signs is detestable to the Lord. These verses were used like daggers, especially against women, elders, the poor, and anyone on the edges of power. The same systems that canonized apocalypse criminalized intuition. Astrologers were burned, midwives were hanged, seers were drowned, and all the while the church continued its own rituals of scrying, only they called it discernment or revelation, so long as it stayed in the hands of the ordained. This I have a huge fucking problem with, but you know what? It is what it is, and we're here talking about it. This wasn't just about theology, it was about ownership. If you could read the stars, if you could speak to the dead, if you could dream visions of the future, then you weren't waiting for the second coming. You were already walking in power. And that was the real heresy. So the apocalypse wasn't just a future event, it became a psychic environment, a shadow cast over every intuition, every inner knowing, every magical birthright we carried. And that shadow is still with us today. This is more than just dogma. It didn't just stay within the text, it moved into culture, into memory, and epigenetics, even. It somehow became embedded in how we see ourselves. Do not turn to mediums or spiritists, says Leviticus 19:31, or you will be defiled by them. Defiled. Not misguided, not wronged, defiled. The language here is deliberate. It creates shame not just around action, but around identity. You don't just use divination, you become unclean by association with it. And yet the kings still had their astrologers. The church still watched the sky, popes still consulted omens before war and coronation, because the truth is, prophecy was never banned, it was claimed, it was controlled and reserved for the elect. You see this with Augustine, who declared that miracles and prophecy were now confined to the church. You see it with the Synod of Laodicea. I don't know how to say that. I'm going to sound stupid. Either way, which explicitly forbade clerics from consulting soothsayers or diviners. You see it in the brutal logic of inquisitors and witch finders who saw divination not as curiosity, but treason against heaven. It's no accident that Revelation also gives us the whore of Babylon, a woman draped in scarlet, holding a cup of abominations. She's sensual, powerful, intuitive, and she's the enemy of Christ in the final days. It is any wonder that Divination 2 is painted in red and black. What the church feared was not just magic, it was autonomy. To read your own future is an act of rebellion. To believe that God speaks through your cards, your dreams, your bones, it is to break the monopoly of salvation. And that is where the trauma cuts deepest. Because this fear was not just taught, it was inherited. It calcified in our bloodlines. It passed through generations, often silently, as gut tightening anxiety. I know a lot of us feel that today. Spiritual insecurities, and most of all, religious guilt. Even now, many witches, especially those from Christian upbringings, feel that shadow, brushing the back of their neck when they light the candle, flip the card, or whisper to the dead. It's not just superstition, it's residue. The haunting of Revelation is not just apocalyptic, it's personal, and we carry it whether we believe it or not. But here's the truth that they never wanted us to remember. The world the world has ended 1,000 times before, and every ending births a witch. Every collapse makes room for another kind of seeing. Divination is not about predicting destruction, it's about reclaiming the right to witness our own becoming on our own terms. So, what happens when you tell a world that the future belongs to God alone? That dreams must be filtered through priests, that stars are silent unless read from the pulpits, and that the intuition is a trap set by serpents. You don't just create obedience, you create a vacuum. And into that vacuum, the Christian devil was born. Because when a prophecy can't be tamed, it is, of course, demonized. Witches didn't just appear as symbols of sin, they were designed, constructed, confined into monsters. Witches is just the name that we have today, but these, all of us have existed long, long, long before. And with them, all acts of divination became marks of the damned. I deeply went into the Malleus Maleficarum before, but in that infamous 15th century witch hunting manual, divination is listed among the first signs of witchcraft. There's a quote: "All diviners, enchanters, charmers, and witches are heretics and infidels, for by such arts they deny the faith." So, as we've gathered, to divine was to deny God, and to seek knowledge outside of Scripture was to consort with demons. Even the act of asking became dangerous. Tarot didn't exist yet in its modern form, but scrying, throwing bones, reading signs, and interpreting dreams and visions have always existed. Eventually, curiosity itself became suspicious because what the church feared most wasn't the devil, it was disobedience. You see, divination threatens the entire architecture of authoritarian religion because to divine is to ask what else is possible, and that question itself is revolutionary. Divination makes us sovereign. It teaches us to listen, to sense the shape of things before they arrive, to prepare, align, and choose. But in a system built on submission, choice is dangerous, so the image of the diviner has been demonized. Twisted into a hag, the harlot, the serpent woman whispering falsehoods into Eve's ear, we see this mirrored in the story of the Witch of Endor, a seer in the Hebrew Bible who calls forth the spirit of the prophet Samuel for King Saul. I remember asking my nana a few times about this witch. I think just before I was like, oh, like, why isn't there any witches in the Bible or any magic? Or, I remember specifically asking some sort of question and her coming back to me and saying, well, there is. She's called the Witch of Endor. And I remember her telling me the story and reading it to me, but I was so enchanted by it. The Witch of Endor, the name itself has always been so enchanting to me. So Samuel 28:11, then said the woman, whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring me up Samuel. She is unnamed, unhonored, and though she gives a true prophecy, she is condemned for it. The message is clear. Even truth, if it comes from the wrong source, is still unholy. And that's the part that still lingers today, isn't it? Even now, many of us, especially those raised within Christian confines traditions, feel the sting of this moral sorting. The truth is only valid if it comes from an, quote, approved source. That guidance must be prayed for, not drawn from a deck. That knowledge must be humble, never claimed. This is how the oracular was exiled from the sacred, and how we are taught to fear ourselves. Because make no mistake, the fear of divination isn't about the cards or the bones or the planets themselves. It's about the autonomy. It's about the reclaiming the right to seek answers outside of authority, to really just declare, I am in conversation with the universe, I am in communion with the unseen, and I am allowed to know. Sadly, I see this translate to today as many witches still hesitate or second guess rituals, altars, intuition. Most of us carry generations of shame dressed as discernment, being told to mistrust ourselves in the name of salvation. But divination was never meant to be salvation, it was meant to be sovereignty. And in a world still gripped by doomsday thinking, reclaiming our oracular voice is an act of revolution. Not to predict the end, but to remember that endings are not punishments, they are thresholds. We've talked about the suppression, the fear, the exile of divination, but trauma doesn't just live in the books or doctrine. It echoes, it reverberates, it just hides in plain sight. And that's where we enter the realm of the collective shadow. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Fate, prophecy, endings. How many of us, witches, sensitives, seekers, seers, have felt ruled by these invisible narratives? How many of us have grown up haunted by the idea that the world is always about to collapse, or maybe that even suffering is holy, that our gifts are dangerous. This is the shadow of Christian eschatology, the theology of the end times. It didn't just predict destruction, it made us fall in love with it. It sanctified the apocalypse. It told us the world must burn so heaven can come. You must die to be reborn, and you must suffer to be saved. These are not just metaphors, these are programs, psychological implants passed down through family lines, cultural myths, spiritual traditions. And when you grow up beneath that shadow, consciously or not, you begin to mistrust joy. That itself is psychology 101. You tell someone something enough times, they start to fucking believe it. You sabotage clarity. You fear your own power because somewhere deep down you were taught that power is pride, and pride leads to the fall. This is why so many witches hesitate before trusting their intuition, why our cards feel maybe too good to be true, why our dreams are dismissed as fantasy, why our rituals feel like rebellion. We were told not to know, and worse, we were told not to want to know. But here's what's rarely spoken. The collective fear of divination is really a fear of our own becoming. Because divination is a mirror. It shows us not just what is coming, but who we are, who we've been, and who we could be if we stopped dimming ourselves. Divination is not a loophole or a shortcut or a game. It is a sacred act of remembering. It is how we reassemble the broken mirror of the soul. And this is why so many witches struggle with spiritual imposter syndrome, because the deeper we go, the more ancient the resistance becomes. There are parts of you, parts of all of us, that still believe we must earn the right to know. That clarity must come with suffering, that intuition must be doubted, that we must stay small so as not to be punished. But the shadow is not our enemy, it is the guardian at the threshold. Our shadow asks us, will you reclaim what was forbidden? Will you let yourself see clearly, even if it scares you? Will you stop apologizing for being the one who knows? Because the world is shifting, the veil is thinning, not just between realms, but between the conscious and the unconscious, the remembered and the forgotten. And if we moved through this era, this strange apocalypse of systems and stories, we cannot do so blindly. We must become the oracles again. But first, we must call our shadow selves home. We must bless the little girl or the little boy who hid their tarot deck in a shoebox under the bed. We must honor the the little boy or the little girl who dreamed in symbols and who was told to just pray it away. We must hold the version of ourselves who wanted to know, who always knew, but was told not to ask. That itself is the spell now. Not to fix what is broken, but to integrate what was exiled. You are an oracle in a long bloodline of visionaries who lit candles in the dark, not to curse the night, but to speak with it. And if the church feared anything, it was just that. It was not just power of prophecy they feared, it was the ease with which it could be accessed, the intimacy, the personal nature of it, the quiet rebellion of trusting your own soul over their scripture. Divination empowers because it returns sovereignty to the seeker. And there are so many ways to do it, so many methods, each with their own flavor, energy, and rhythm. Maybe you pull a tarot card in the morning with your coffee, asking, what do I need to know today? Maybe you feel more drawn to pendulums, watching the gentle sway back and forth as your body speaks before your mind catches up. Some witches cast runes, letting the old symbols land like echoes from another time, and others throw bones, literal pieces of ancestors and animal spirits, and read the pattern like a map. Then there's scrying, gazing into a mirror, a bowl of water, the flame of a candle, and letting images emerge. Astrology. Oh, the language of the stars, right? That's a whole another thing too. It's a whole cosmos of timing cycles. It's a personal blueprint. And dreams are the oldest form of divination there is. Ask a question before you sleep and pay attention to what comes to you. The subconscious knows how to speak, especially your subconscious. Duh, you guys speak the same goddamn language. The ancestors know how to answer. And here's the truth. Divination doesn't make life easier. It makes us braver. But sometimes the message feels unclear, right? The cards won't speak, the pendulum is erratic, maybe, the runes or the bones feel silent. This doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Divination isn't always smooth or simple. It's a dialogue, not a delivery. That's, opposite of what these scriptures are. They are delivering you something, and divination is more than that. It's a relationship. And like all relationships, it has its pauses, its complexities, and even miscommunications. When the message feels muddy or off, I recommend just taking a breath. Ask yourself, am I too emotionally charged right now? Am I already hoping for a certain outcome? Am I asking the right question? Sometimes the question needs to be reframed, like not will this happen, but what energy is present if I go this way. Other times the message is clear, but maybe we resist it ourselves. We try to pull more cards, we ask again. That's okay too, it's part of the process, but you need to be honest with yourself. Are you looking for guidance or are you looking for permission? Are you listening or are you hoping to override your intuition with a nicer answer? If your readings feel blocked, try cleansing your space, sit in silence, sleep on it, ask again later. I always recommend keeping a journal of patterns. Over time, you will begin to notice the threads weaving through. And remember, just because something doesn't make sense in the moment doesn't mean it won't unfold with time. Usually, always unfolds with time. Divination is a living practice. It will stretch you, it will teach you, even frustrate you. But if you keep showing up with reverence and curiosity, it will absolutely deepen. It will begin to speak in layers and echoes and truths you didn't know you were ready for. So, what matters most isn't the method, but it's the relationship and the trust. You have to be willing to ask, and then you also have to be willing to listen, even when the answer is subtle, strange, or not what you expected, or even not what you wanted. Divination is about developing the conversation, one symbol at a time, ways of listening to the deeper rhythms of things, ways of hearing the soul, the spirits, the ancestors, and the self. So we don't need permission to peer into the dark and ask it to speak. In a world that's still haunted by doomsday narratives, divination is not just a tool, it's a balm, it's a counterspell. It's the soft defiance of saying, I will not be afraid to know. Rebuilding trust with your intuition isn't a sudden awakening either, right? It's a slow homecoming. It often begins with noticing the small nudges, how your body reacts when something feels off, how a certain image won't leave your mind, or how a dream lingers in your bones. Pay attention to these, write them down, follow them, even just a little. Intuition speaks in very quiet ways until it knows it's a safe space to speak louder. It can help affirm aloud, my intuition is not the enemy. It is ancient. It is wise. It is mine. Come up with an affirmation that speaks true to you. You might need to say that every day, especially if you were taught otherwise. Over time, the fear will soften, the guilt will quiet, the internal compass recalibrates itself, and you begin to realize you were never broken. You were just silenced. Let divination be a part of that healing. Really let it be the language you speak with your soul when words fail. Let each reading be a step toward self trust, even if the message is unclear, even if you still doubt it. That too is a part of the spell, showing up anyway. If you felt afraid to begin, start there. Start scared. Start unsure. Just start, because your magic is not waiting for perfection, it's waiting for permission, and only you can give it. But if you keep showing up and with that reverence and that curiosity, it will crack and it will deepen. Your relationship with your tools will evolve, your questions will sharpen, your interpretations will grow richer, more intuitive, more embodied. You'll stop asking things like, am I doing this right? And, you will begin to trust, this is what I see, and this is what I know. So the more you divine, the more you begin to remember. You remember the witch you were before the world told you to be afraid. You remember the language your ancestors whispered into the wind, and the magic doesn't ask for credentials. It asks for presence, willingness, and devotion. And if you falter, if you fall back into silence or forget your own knowing for a while, that's okay. Divination, like spirit, like the moon, it's cyclical. You are allowed to leave and you are allowed to return again and again. The altar is patient, the cards will wait, the stars will keep turning, and your magic will always still be there. It's not buried, not broken. It's just waiting for you to remember your way back. So I know this was a lot, and maybe it left you with more things to think about than before. Well, either way, if you actually followed me on this tangent, because sometimes I feel like my episodes are a little bit long-winded tangents more than anything. I guess I'm still kind of finding my footing, but I hope you picked up something useful from it regardless. I really have a lot of things to share on this front when it comes to stepping out of any sort of religious trauma and recognizing how it really affects all of us as magical practitioners. So I wanted to bring that back this week, even if it was just a little moment, but I hope you enjoyed it. So, just as a little side update, my Etsy shop is up and running, even with just the few boxes I have listed. I hope they can start to find their forever homes with some of you. And of course, wherever you are in the world, I hope that you have a wonderful morning, day, or night.